Welcome to Graphic Policy Radio. I'm your host, Ilana Levin, and this is a comics podcast. This is a comics podcast for people who were maybe skeptical over whether Tony Stark could be a comrade, but are thrilled to see him embrace card check union recognition in canon. Joining me on the podcast again is one of my favorite people to talk to about comics and comics media, who is also now one of my favorite people making comics media, which is the return of Spencer Ackerman, who is an award-winning national security journalist, author of the book Reign of Terror, and now is applying all of that to writing Iron Man for Marvel Comics. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Ilana.
I have to say, this is what it takes to get me to care about Iron Man, is you get one of my favorite political analysts, journalists, left-wing thinkers, and you're like, here's Iron Man. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to read Iron Man.
Okay.
So congratulations. And I will tell you guys, this comic is tremendous. I was very enthusiastic about Waller versus Wildstorm, of course. And whether you looked at that or didn't, this is definitely like, you have a style, and that's great because style is valuable. And I love the style. And it's just been so exciting to be able to see you playing with a very large toy. How does that feel?
It feels great. Thank you so much. I'm glad the book is landing for you. I felt kind of the same way, that it was really a dream come true to do Waller versus Wildstorm, and the amount of creative freedom I had on that book, I just find moving. I'll say that's directed to my editor, Chris Conroy, given that it was the first piece, not just of comics that I'd ever done, but the first piece of fiction I'd ever have.
Yeah.
And now to have parlayed that to Iron Man, I could not have known what I was in for. And it's been an incredible experience.
It's so interesting because, you know, the reason that I've historically not been an Iron Man reader is that it seemed to me like it would often be a platform for a lot of fetishism of just focusing on sort of the toys and gadgets and the military-industrial complex. And yet, I know that isn't actually true. There are plenty of writers and artists who have subverted all of that. And that's also like, you're here to both make creative responses to that tech piece and offer like meaningful analysis of the world in which Tony has operated prior to his heroic endeavors.
And to be really clear, make a really fun, action-filled, fast-moving superhero comic. Just to be really clear, because like that is the assignment, right? On a book like Iron Man, there must be spectacle, right? There's got to be thrills. So that only when I take care of that do I get to have the luxury of doing, you know, infusing it with some of the flavors that I personally enjoy and want to explore.
You're also writing for a voice that, because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is a very established voice. Even though I'm not an Iron Man reader, I have an Iron Man voice in my head. And I think you've captured something where I'm like, yes, I can hear Robert Downey Jr. in this.
So I don't know how to take, because I have on the second page of the notebook that I got for Iron Man, I have written only 15-20% max RDJ. Like I'm trying to not have it be the Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man. I also have that voice in my head just because of the ubiquity of the Iron Man movies, and I think it's I think it's a mistake to go zero RDJ, right? Like there are going to be people who are there for that, but at the same time, Comics Tony is a different character. Like he's not quippy and he's not Uncle Ben. So I wanted to write someone who kind of sounded more like, you know, just to name some Iron Man writers who I thought have written like a great Iron Man voice: Gary Friedrich, Denny O'Neil, Kurt Busiek, Matt Fraction, Chris Cantwell, Jerry Duggan. No disrespect to anyone who's not on that list. Those are just like people who I feel like really get, in particular, Chris Cantwell, the rhythm of his dialogue I love.
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah. Like I don't want to assume that listeners are all coming from my position of being like not particularly an Iron Man person coming to it. And so, maybe I should be just being like, yes, this is the most Iron Man-y of Iron Man books, but my orientation to it is as is. It made me also think a lot about like, we have an Iron Man in your story who's like wants green energy and is, fighting against evil corporate actors. And I'm like, yeah, how is thinking about like Iron Man and Green Arrow in some ways have kind of a similar role in their universes, but are also extremely different characters. And I've been a huge fan of Green Arrow and less so of Iron Man. And I think it's because I had a resistance to like the focus on the tech piece. The best I can think of.
Can I just riff off that? Because I don't.
Yes, please.
So you're not wrong. There are runs that are more interested in Iron Man without a military industrial complex critique. One of my favorite Iron Man runs is, and also does me the tremendous favor of pointing out that just because Tony doesn't make weapons for the U.S. military doesn't mean he doesn't make other equipment for them.
Right.
That's Kurt Busiek's run, which is amazing. We can talk about Busiek later, and I'd want to, but just to kind of go back to your point, then there are others that really take that critique and, use it as a plot engine. So, I have had my moments where I have needed an Iron Man break. But then when I come back to the character, particularly a lot of the runs that, without even like agreeing with my politics, just feel like addressing similar questions, I've really found has sustained the character. You're right. He's definitely not Green Arrow. I think the difference is Green Arrow is someone different than Oliver Queen when he puts on the mask, right? Like maybe you disagree with that, and I know you're much more of a Green Arrow head than I am, but he doesn't seem to focus throughout his character history on what he can do as Oliver Queen as he pours his ambition into what he can do as Green Arrow, right?
It depends on the run.
Right? Okay, yeah. Sure, fair. But like that's not, I feel there's enough there to differentiate him from Iron Man in that regard.
But you're right. Like Tony is, he doesn't have a sacred identity. Like, and that is a huge distinction between him and almost every other superhero you can think of.
I would also go as far to say that it's not like the reason why he doesn't have a secret identity is because Iron Man is there for Tony Stark, right? Mm-hmm. Like he is achieving his Tony Starkness when he has the Iron Man suit on. And that is something that I think like, if we're to put him against the other like comic book superhero billionaires, like Batman is definitely like, if you were to call him Bruce, he would probably bristle a little because in his mind, he's Batman.
Oh yeah, no, that man's got issues.
Yeah. Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, probably like somewhere between him and, between Batman and Iron Man on that spectrum. But like, Iron Man is a nickname. Batman is like an ethos, like in addition to being a persona, right?
I like that.
Yeah, so I guess that's sort of how I would look at it. I also think that, and no spoilers, you'll see this in the run a lot. What he seeks to do as Tony Stark is on no less a grand scale than what he seeks to do as Iron Man. And that I found was like a really good and by good I mean useful entrance into the character.
Yeah, yeah. Well, designing mechs is like a central piece of doing an Iron Man book, though it is just not something that's going to be in like a Green Arrow book.
Yes.
And we are not going to get to spoilers yet, although we will. But in our spoiler-free part, I'll just say, like, you definitely pull some stuff together that seems very creative and innovative to me. So,
Thank you.
Julius Otois, who you're partnered with on this, is so wonderful.
He's a genius.
And I really love the layouts he's doing. And let's rewind a little bit. So how did this book come about?
I sent, with the aid of a writer at Marvel who I don't know if they want to be named, so I won't, the Waller versus Wildstorm PDFs to Tom Brevoort at Marvel Comics, one of their senior editors, basically just to see if I could get a foot in the door. And I'm very happy to say that when I heard back, it was very quickly. And to tell me that the editor of Iron Man, Sarah Brunstad, was going to get in touch with me. And Sarah reached out. I didn't know at that point she was the editor on Iron Man. I figured like this would be like, oh, cool. They might need like, an annual or like an 8-page backup or an Infinity comic or something like that.
Yeah.
Like that would be cool.
Yeah.
And then she was like, I have this idea for Iron Man. I'm going to be taking that book over. Would you like, how would you like to pitch for it? Oh, go. What? So that was
amazing.
February, March, something like that of 2024. And because of Waller versus Wildstorm was my previous book. It was a 4-issue Elseworlds for DC's Black Label. So not in continuity, neither the ability, if you look at it that way, nor the potential liability, if you look at it that way, of impinging on other continuity. And Sarah said, we could go one of two ways on this. When she told me this was an ongoing, she was like, we can do something where this doesn't really touch on the rest of the Marvel universe, that it can be kind of, sequestered and, the occasional reference to whatever else is going on, or like it can tie in deeply because there are some plans that the broader Avengers office has been coming up with, that they will use Iron Man for that. It would be your version of Iron Man that they would use, but they, depending on how they would use it. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to do this book is a contributing piece to the Marvel Universe status quo at this time. Maybe I will, years later look back on that and feel like that was dumb. But I am having an absolute blast doing that. And some of that stuff has been solicited and some of it hasn't.
That's interesting that they gave you that choice, and I think it's super cool that you made the decision you made, because you're right. Like you're gonna try and see how it goes, and this kind of gives you some opportunity to play bigger. So I think that's smart and really, really exciting. So you mentioned some of your favorite Iron Man runs. What do you feel like, if there are specific trades you want to shout out to people? I'm sure they would appreciate that, but.
Oh, sure. So no particular order, but Fraction and LaRocca's 5 Nightmares and then Stark Resilient storylines are immaculate. Creme de la creme Iron Man. A great spy book. A wonderfully paced book. Really, I think for me, that might be peak Salvador Larroca. I love the way that book looks. And it does just crazy things with the character. I keep mentioning, Kurt Busiek and Sean Chen, Patch Zurcher is also in on that. That run on Iron Man is a run kind of destined to be, unfortunately, memory hold. First, because it's bankruptcy Marvel. This was right after Heroes were born. So this was like Heroes Return to Iron Man. You know, they launched the book. I want to say around like 1997, 1998, something like that. And like Marvel's in a very bad place at that point. But also Kurt Busiek and was it Carlos Pacheco? Who were doing Avengers at that point. Like that book is one of the best Avengers runs ever. And at that time, Busiek is also writing Iron Man. Right. And like those two factors together kind of make it, I feel, like very unfortunately overlooked. Because Busiek is writing the hell out of that book. There are so many things you will see in our book that like pay homage to that run. But among them all, Busiek, like, so I was not actively reading comic books when this came out. I read this retrospectively. And I remembered Sean Chen as one of the promising artists at Valiant, but I hadn't seen his ceiling yet. And when Busiek and Chen are paired together, Chen, his stuff is gorgeous. This is one of the best that the Iron Man book has ever looked. I want to say this not so much as like a comment on the story, but a comment on like the visual style of the book. It looks like a soap opera, like in a really great way. Yeah. Like it's real, like lush, dramatic. These are very beautiful people in melodramatic, like storytelling, like effect. Like, and one of the things that I love that they do in that run is it's a lot of like, it's a double page spread, but it might be 4 panels. So like there's one panel that's the splash that's like 75% of the page. And then like the remaining 25%, like whether, you know, it's a, you know, descending vertical or whether it's like a horizontal or like ascending diagonal, something like that, like a couple, like 3 other panels there that help get you to the throat of the next page. And like, I love that. I've been doing that a lot. I might be doing that in every single issue. Just like it's a great way to like let Julius work, you know, like when we got paired, I asked him, what do you love to draw and what do you hate to draw? And I'm happy to say that like one of the things that he said first that he loved to draw was like facial acting in quiet moments. I'm like, oh my God, yes. Like
I see that paid off a lot.
Yeah. I am like a rookie mistake that I am making is writing in my script like too like overly complicated character direction. I mean it to like convey a vibe. And I've tried to tell Julius, don't take me so seriously. Like I'm writing this to like give vibes, not directions. And like, I want you to be, you know, like when I turn in a plot, I haven't worked out everything, right? Like I want to give myself room to work it out on the page to see what works and what doesn't. And I want him to have that too, because otherwise like he's not going to have fun on this book. And like, I know how thrilled Julius is to be on Iron Man and like to have a stage like this. He knows how thrilled I am that I get to be part of his rocket-like ascent. Like, I fully expect Julius to go on to like the biggest books there are in this business. That's how good his stuff is. Like, you see it.
He's one of the biggest books. I mean, Iron Man is one of the biggest books. So, yeah.
I don't want to like shout out names of titles because there are people working on those titles, but like I expect in the future these caliber of books will be drawn by Julius Autois.
Yeah, he's fantastic, and I'm excited to see you. And everything you said meets what I witnessed in it. To me, it seems almost intuitive that Iron Man is like a national security oriented comic book, but is that always the case? Does that feel that way inherently to you?
It feels that way inherently to me. Some of my favorite eras of Iron Man, as I've mentioned, come when he is interacted like very directly with the national security apparatus. Not often a pleasant experience, which is usually, even before he becomes director of S.H.I.E.L.D., very often manipulated by Nick Fury. So, like, his relationship with S.H.I.E.L.D. is not a great one. And we start exploring that in issue 2, where we have Melinda May start her colloquy with Tony, who was a famed S.H.I.E.L.D. agent and like comes to the comics from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show.
I had a feeling.
And so there we get that kind of somewhat oppositional, somewhat hostile, but also, you know, deeply rooted and somewhat symbiotic relationship between Iron Man and the national security apparatus. And we sure will be going into that a lot from that angle and other ones.
Something that was really meaningful, I know for me, that I want to make sure that our listeners hear about before we move into some kind of spoiler-filled conversation is when my friend and frequent co-host Stephen Atwell died this spring. You came to me like right away and were like, is there a way that I offered to commemorate him in the comic? And that was been really amazing seeing that come to life and being able to share that with his family.
Well, I have you to thank for, I have you to thank for that, because you put together the memorial for Stephen, and it was at that memorial where both you and his family talked about, like, reiterated, you know, his just deep and abiding love for the Marvel Universe. And while we were there, like, it slowly dawned on me that there was sort of something I could do about that, given that the first issue was going to open with a labor action.
Mm-hmm.
And it occurred to me, like, I might have a place to put Stephen, like, as a background character in this. And I went to tell his mother that. And then I'm happy to say that we did that Julius drew, I thought, a really lovely likeness of Stephen. We named him on camera, and it is now canon on Earth 616 that Stephen Atwell is an active labor militant.
And I had seen the panel before it hit, but I didn't have the words on it at that time. So I had seen the likeness, which is excellent. But there was something about seeing his name with it also that just like really got me. And I know how much he would have loved that. So thank you for making that happen. It's amazing.
Well, he was a very special person, and he left us too soon.
I know. I'm like fucked up about. I mean, you know, you were talking with me about, you know, how you've handled these things yourself has been helpful too. So thank you for that. One of the biggest things that I think about now when I think about Tony Stark is the whole Elon Musk fucking question, and it's so interesting to be writing this comic during a time where the mask is fully off, right? Anybody who was maybe doubting, is Elon Musk essentially a supervillain or not? It is clear to you now. And we have this person who really wrapped himself in the mythology of Tony Stark and like used that to build his persona and really projects himself on it, despite obviously being very antithetical in kinds of ways. Like, how do you, like, was like that? Was any of that in your mind, like when approaching the character or the stories?
Not so much. There are gonna be elements of the Musk factor that I think you'll see inflect the book, but I'm not gonna like turn to the camera and be like, "We're gonna talk about Elon Musk."
Yeah.
So I guess one of the things that I wanted to bring to the character is that like the scale on which this guy operates is so gigantic that he cannot help but like impact the lives of millions of others, whatever it is he does. And that doesn't just apply to Elon Musk, but it does apply to Elon Musk. And you'll see my Tony Stark deal with that very directly.
Cool. Yeah. And I mean, I'm seeing that already being taken in as well. What do you feel is the significance of Tony Stark as like the superhero who has alcoholism? I mean, he's not the only one, but he was kind of like the first really for them to make like a stated story about it.
I mean, without getting too personal, one of the things that people who struggle with addictions do is try and negotiate limits on that addiction and transfer like addictive behavior into places that might and be healthier.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that you can kind of bring into the character. You can kind of like write the character as struggling with without ever having to like address, like, you know, we did like 2 panels basically.
They're really great. I went in that whole sequence, and now we're just going to be full spoilers.
Okay.
I was like, This is like the world's best executed, least cheesy way to bring in Demon in a bottle. So, and he nailed the art style. Yeah.
And not just that, but like, so the other person we have to talk about on this book, and Alana, I'm sorry, I don't know how you're going to edit all this stuff together, but thank you. The other person we have to talk on this book is Alex Sinclair, the colorist.
Yeah.
So a brief history. I gasped when I learned that Alex was going to be on this book. Like, I had to first make sure that like this, I wasn't like having a weird moment transposing the name of someone onto some different person. To make a very long story short, Alex Sinclair is like a living legend in comic book coloring. He is, when he was like 18, 19, something like that, he won like a fan art contest from Homage Studios right when Jim Lee and Scott Williams and Mark Silvestri and Will Portacio left Marvel to start Image. And he comes on board and is basically told, like, now we need you to learn like Adobe. And he's like, what is Adobe? And he's like, it's this programming thing that, like, you know, we're going to color stuff on the computer. And he was like, okay, how do you do that? And they're like, we were hoping that you could take a couple weeks and tell us.
Yeah.
And I got to hear this story over dinner at New York Comic Con. And I was like hanging on every word that he was saying. But basically, that's Alex Sinclair, one of the pioneers of digital coloring in comics. He makes this book look even more incredible than what Julius has already done. And on that sequence, he went to like a dot matrix, like 1970s, 1980s, like Bronze Age printing matrix to make it feel like the story was taking place way back then, with us ever having to get into, like, you know, the fraught, you know, age discourse, continuity discourse. Yeah. Like, that level of storytelling efficiency just done with coloring style is an example among many of the effortless brilliance of Alex Sinclair. And I don't mean this. I mean to say effortless, and only to say he makes it look effortless. He puts in a tremendous amount of work to his craft.
Apparently he had to literally invent the form. That sounds pretty laborious.
Incredible. But like when the history of this industry is written, like that's a Hall of Fame career. Like that's someone who needs to be remembered.
Yeah, that is a very instrumental. That's like being Les Paul or something, you know? That's wild.
The most amazing guy to work with too. So thrilled. An Iron Man super fan. Who would have known? He's done very little work for Marvel because he has been for so long. I don't want to make this like this is just me fanboying about Alex Sinclair, but like he has been for a long time the only colorist that Jim Lee will let color him. Like when Jim Lee, so like
that means you're doing stuff for DC.
And like you're really doing stuff for DC. Alex is coloring this while he is working on Hush too. I'm honored by that.
Wow, that's so cool. Well, that explains why it looks so great.
It looks incredible. Yeah, this whole book looks so good.
There been so many moments in this comic where I just was like, just felt so excited and delighted by what was happening next. And obviously one of them is when you had Emma show up in that same issue. And that, I mean, I guess that kind of goes with the territory that if you're going to write Iron Man, you get now these days, if you're going to write Iron Man, I guess you get to also do some Emma Frost, even if it's your mind's projection of Emma Frost, than not actual Emma Frost.
Okay, so that's where I have to point out is important to point out, right? Because like that is not Emma. That is a magically manipulated, intrusive thought about how Tony fears Emma interprets their relationship.
Yeah.
And
no, that
takes the form
clear.
of Emma Frost. Right. No one has ever had less fun while receiving a lap dance from Emma Frost than Tony in that scene.
That's a great quote. No, I loved having him tell himself that she's thinking that he is using her mutant status to absolve himself of his human guilt. It was like, because like that's what he fucking would be asking him. Like I
truly believe it. I truly believe so. The mandate for this book, a mandate that I accepted eagerly and agree with, is that because of the way that Jerry Duggan brilliantly tied Iron Man into the Fall of X, that this new run has to be back in kind of Avengers world, so to speak. That said, the Fall of X happened. He lived through a genocide. He lived through a genocide that didn't target him. And he must, at times, ask himself if he is entitled to his trauma, if he is entitled to the trauma that he experienced while he was trying to be on the side of the righteous in a genocide. So that's just how I intend to write, like, what's in the back of Tony's head. We don't have to, like, get into it necessarily. Again, back to the very first thing I said. This is a big, fun action superhero comic. Everything else I get to do only after I service that prime directive on this book.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly fun putting him in a zipper hood, so congratulations.
Yes, thank you. It's amazing and when I say it's amazing, what I mean is it is with great appreciation that I see what Sarah Brunstad has allowed me to do in this book. So I'm very grateful to Sarah for being willing to like entertain some of my brain rot.
What a wonderful script note. I mean, and like serious props, because that is an example of something which they could have just said no to. And the story could have moved along. It isn't like crucial detail, but like it says so much. It's so on the nose for like the character. And I
can't be the only one to have ever thought that there might be an Iron Man helmet that zipped in that way.
You're right. That whole sequence and also the pull of Dr. Druid, of course, because he's typically Like, you tell me why you chose Dr. Druid.
Why Druid? Yes, thank you.
Yes.
The crucial question. I appreciate it so much that you asked me that. So, I really like the era of Avengers where it's Walt Simonson writing, John Buscema doing breakdowns, and Tom Palmer doing finishes. I have no idea what the breakdown of the artwork was there. It looks like a John Buscema comic to me. But like that's like late 80s Avengers. And in particular, there's a story there where like Dr. Druid is the leader of the Avengers. This is cast-wise truly a flop era. And these stories are so good because it's Dr. Druid basically like getting manipulated because Kang recognizes that he's a simp. And Kang shows up in a femme body and like manipulates Druid in a variety of ways to like steer Avengers stuff in his direction. And like Druid is also such a like a weird looking character. Somehow like a very unathletic middle-aged man, like who never really achieved anything, was on the Avengers for a substantial amount of time. And you know, I'm drawn to that.
He also is a super hero who in Golden Age comics where he began was
big
like
problem.
A white guy in Asian face. And so it makes sense that like, since he's already someone who has shown poor judgment, you know, not like someone who's evil, but has shown poor judgment. It makes sense that he would find himself in this situation as a result of additional poor judgment.
You definitely don't want to end up thrall to Velasco.
No.
A really bad guy to be in thrall to. Like, thralldom is never going to be pleasant, but aye, buddy.
Yeah.
Don't
just
click
that one
link.
Danzig LP is the only thrall the only thrall in this household.
Fairly early on when I was like, let's do some magic stuff here because that'll like throw Iron Man off kilter. And like, I like stories like that where like the hero, like the super competent hero is suddenly thrown into a circumstance whose logic they can't immediately figure out. So Chris Cantwell did that with making Iron Man cosmic, so we couldn't do space. So I figured magic, and that would be fun. And so when we
it was built in with the Mysterium thing. Like it was perfectly well set up, like from all the Mysterium stuff from X books, you know.
However, the way it actually worked, I'll reveal this. I'll reveal this on your podcast, Alana. The way that actually worked was like came up with like the outline of the story and then was invited to a dinner with the Avengers office, which was an absolute delight. It was the first time that I had been like around a table with like comic book writers and editors. And among the people there was Jerry Duggan. And I, could not have been a more collegial or a friendlier guy. One of the things that I said when I learned that he would be writing West Coast Avengers was like, just tell me what you want me to seed in this book so you can do it. And like Jerry has been like amazingly gracious, and less so with this, where like at the table, he asked like, can you tell me a little bit about like what you're thinking with Iron Man? And I like gave kind of the bare outlines of what became this first arc, the Stark Roxxon War. And Jerry's like, oh, that's cool. Like, how are you going to solve the problem of the Mysterium armor? And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, because like the armor, remember, like the armor that we leave him in, it's anti-magic, right? Because it's Mysterium. And then, and like at the table, like I was just like, what if what if the new Ironmonger armor is the Mysterium armor and it's been stolen? And I was like, okay, cool. And then this ends up becoming you are very gracious for saying it does flow naturally. To like a smarter person than myself, it indeed flows naturally, but the way it actually worked is I forgot about that. And so now I've had to do it the hard way.
Fair enough. Well, I thought it worked really well. And also just because like when I was like, oh, she took his Mysterium. Just so freaking appropriation and resource theft. And you know what I mean? It was of course she like took his endangered thing that he's barely even supposed to have in the first place. What
I liked about it and what I wanted to kind of keep going is that it's also like his memory of Emma.
Yeah.
Like he stole his wife's jewelry or like the last bottle of his wife's perfume.
Yeah.
And he wants it back. And like, that's why he keeps calling it like, that was my wife's, like, give it back to me.
Yeah, no, I have, yeah, it's totally feelings inducing, which I hadn't always thought that generally speaking, being hostile to the notion of them as a couple. But like, I
didn't know you were anti-white man.
Yeah.
That's the portmanteau, by the way.
I like it. Yeah. But I support it now. I enjoyed when it became clear that she was like, this was like a political scheme. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, that's fine. But no, now I'm into it. I'm intrigued. And shout out also to, I really appreciated that you had the Ironmonger armor. I mean, and maybe this is entirely the artist's part, but like you didn't have it femmed up, which would have just been really maddening making like.
Yeah, like, and that's not like I had nothing to do with that. Like that's all Julius's design sensibilities.
Well, I'm really glad that Julius didn't stick some boobs on that suit because that would be stupid.
I think the only thing we ever discussed about it was like, it needs to be enormous. Like it needs to showcase like how powerless Iron Man is. Like, and like he comes back with a design that like, his anime references are incredible. And like, I can't, I'm just simply like, that is a tremendous hole in my, geek knowledge. So like, he should just drive. And like, I don't want to ever get in the way of Julius Autois design.
So the panel that I'm obsessed with, is the image of Tony on a stair climber. Like when he's right out of the hospital, he's like on the stair climber. He weighs like 8 ounces, and his face, is for I think the speech bubble is like, "Why I fell out of the sky," and he's just this like so small and downtrodden in it, and like frustrated and using the stair climber. And I'm like, I feel you. That's my reaction. That's my reaction meme.
Thank you. I like that was like a page. Like I felt that was a treacherous page. It was a treacherous page because like you have to write this guy like furious at this setback that he can't solve. He doesn't understand what happened and he hates that. And I tried to just like run with that kind of sense of like how this narration would work as we just basically have a recovery page. But like, I hope it came across well.
Oh yeah, no, as someone dealing with long drawn out recovery in which I'm not able to work out and wish with all I could that I can, I'm just like, I feel you. But I've never seen Tony look so weakened as we have him in this book, and like it's earned, and like it hurts.
You lose muscle when you are in the hospital for an extended period of time. You'll be shocked at how quickly you lose muscle density, and like that's what we want. That's what I wanted to bring out. That like he feels like he's getting a little older. It's taking him a little longer to recover from things that it used to not take him so long to recover from, and he also used to do things that he recognizes aren't healthy to help him recover from it. Like, again, Chris Cantwell's run had the absolutely brilliant idea for like an addict story to like make it canon that like one of the reasons that he recovers so quickly is because the suit dopes him. And like after, you know, one of the inciting events for his sobriety was recognizing that he has flown the Iron Man armor drunk. Like now he is once again piloting the Iron Man armor impaired, and this time not even noticing it, or he has to do like a really serious inventory about whether he has noticed it and he negotiated with his addiction, whereby he could, as long as it wasn't with alcohol. That's a brilliant story. So we couldn't do that. And I also wanted to honor the fact that like that story happened. So like I have like him doing some like internal narration talking about like he won't let himself take more than like 600 milligrams of ibuprofen.
Yeah.
So like Iron Man fell out of the sky twice, is feeling that physical pain while he goes to do superhero stuff in armor that he cobbles together while in a traction unit and immediately puts back on.
Yeah, it's super brutal. But it all feels like really like when he says, like, you know, as someone with addiction, I can't play with the wiring in my brain safely. That's a bad idea. What did you, I'm wondering, do you know when Iron Man started getting into green energy in the 616?
Yeah, the Stark Resilient with Matt Fraction and Salvador Larroca takes Iron Man to a place where, like, that's what this company Stark Resilient does. Like, it scales up green energy. And, you know, it so happened that that was, like, roughly contemporaneous with, like, the movie where, like, Stark creates green energy. And, like, they kind of do some stuff with that, if I recall correctly, but, like, not a lot. And so that just sort of becomes, like, yet another thing that the Stark family of companies that will have now currently the name Stark Unlimited does, where it's not just like a technology company, but it's like a resource producer as well.
How do you feel that is like really significant?
So in like I just wrote about this in my newsletter, Forever Wars. If you subscribe to my newsletter, which you can find at forever-wars.com, every month after an issue of Iron Man, for paying subscribers, so please do pay me and buy a subscription to Forever Wars if you're interested in the conversation that we're having right now. I'll do like a spoil everything writer behind the scenes paywalled edition, just like doing like an extended commentary on like what I'm thinking about for this. So like I just wrote a little bit about this. Like in a different interview, I talked about Stark Unlimited as something like Taiwan Semiconductor, like one of the most important like economic assets in the world, right? Like Taiwan Semiconductor makes the world's advanced chips, like semiconductor chips. And so like something like 90% of like the both like consumer and military electronic equipment that exist in the United States come from chips fabricated at Taiwan Semiconductor. So like imagine that plus Apple plus Northrop Grumman plus a green energy company on a scale that like in our world kind of doesn't exist yet. Like, I don't know like how big like the GE isn't, like the GE one, the GE green energy offshoot supposed to be like, I don't know if it's the biggest one by like
I would not
market
know.
cap or something. Anyway, point being, like, I don't really, what Tony Stark does is already on already on a global scale. So like with the green energy aspect of it, it definitely helps maneuver the character. I do a riff in issue 3 on like the concept of green capitalism, like as a cynical thing, right? But like, you know, he sure has done worse with his industrial enterprises than green energy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess also just thinking about the question about like, how do you decide what scale of impact is appropriate for it to have on the world? Do you want it to be a world where everything is based on arc reactor and like fossil fuels are gone? Well, you don't, because you actually want them fighting Roxxon, which means there has to be, dirty oil and all that happening.
Yeah,
too.
the way I went about it is just that we haven't had the decarbonization, like where we are in Earth 616 is still a hydrocarbon economy. Stark Unlimited is able to bring green energy to scale beyond what it currently is in like our world. But I don't want to go like too far beyond that, especially because, as you mentioned, I thought it would be like a cool idea for Roxxon, like the 616 is like fossil fuel giant, often up to supervillain stuff. If it looked at Stark Unlimited coming out of the Fall of X, just at that moment reverting to the control of Tony Stark, but not before, like it was on page that Stark Unlimited was out of the weapons business yet, to swoop in and be like, this is the time to acquire this company. Like lock its arms manufacturing portfolio into its like normal, business operations, do an acquisition that freezes those operations into place, like at the moment of, whatever triggers the, beginning of the process of acquisition. And then see if they could succeed on it. Because like Roxxon gets is like, we have the characters, mostly Justine Hammer, articulate, they're getting the world's biggest energy company out of this, because now they will have both hydrocarbon and the biggest renewables resource manufacturer that there is at that point. Plus, they will be getting, the world leader in bleeding age weapons platforms.
I was like, there's just a lot of corporate machinations and intercorporate warfare in the book, which I find really compelling. Is that something that you did research for this, or is part of your reporting work that you have some familiarity with that kind of piece?
So it's borrowing from a lot of, like, some of it is my reporting. Some of it is also like, another run that we just went off on a tangent before I could mention how much I love it, is the era that precedes Fraction Lorocas, which is a father and son team, the Naufs, who write Iron Man while he's director of S.H.I.E.L.D. So like you have like a lot of spy machinations in that era of the book, and also in Fractions, because it's coming in like the era where like Norman Osborn is running the Dark Reign era and is hunting Tony Stark. And then also Busiek and Chen's run, and before that in the early 90s, Len Kaminsky, with a number of artists, do a lot more with like Tony Stark as like, like cutthroat corporate world, like elements tied up with the Iron Man stuff. Like various writers kind of like go in and out of that. And, I wanted to go into it. Like I like that, like, corporate warrior Iron Man, where I get to do some of, my own themes that I like to play with. But might not be able to if like this is just like Iron Man in the armor the whole, if that makes sense.
And it's what is able to bring us the deal with the devil. Tell us how that story came together. I fucking love it.
Oh, thanks. So, we kind of get, we kind of wait until the closing argument in Justine Hammer's acquisition of Stark Unlimited on behalf of a consortium of Roxxon and Advanced Idea Mechanics, which was an active partner in the Orcus genocide. And
just known supervillains.
Known supervillains, like open supervillain science division stuff there. At the closing argument, at the meeting where like Justine expects to close at the board, she mentions that there's a silent backer in this enterprise, and it helps explain why, like, Roxxon is like helping create this like absolute, like, gigantic company that will be the result of its merger. And that's because it has this partnership with unseen interdimensional elements that turn out to be, I guess we would say, demon coded, that are seeking like local markets, that's seeking Earth markets for a product that we might be interested in. And in exchange for being the exclusive purveyor of what we are told is a potentially controversial product, shorthanded as soul poison, the board members and the executives of Stark Unlimited will have access to a higher plane of existence. They will become more than human if they permit this transaction to go through, providing this local purveyorship of these nether beings product. And I am sure you will be shocked to hear that to most people on that board, that sounds like a great deal. And they take the deal, and the merger is about to happen. And Tony recognizes that he can't really Iron Man his way out of that, which is why we have, like, across, all three issues of it, various people saying to him in various ways, you can't Iron Man your way out of this. So he Tony Stark's his way out of this and figures out a way to turn the tables on what this acquisition means by adopting a strategy of denial, as it's known. So, like, they achieve scale. He casts doubt on Justine's ability to maintain that scale. And at that point, if they can't maintain the scale, then it's not really worth it to the nether beings because of the sorts of beings that they are. So if he maintains that, I guess one way you could put it, capital cannot accumulate under the structure offered by known losers like Roxxon and AIM, then why would it be worth it for these extra dimensional beings? And they find that to be a compelling argument. And ultimately, that's how Tony turns the tables on them, and he uses that at the very end of the book because, like, there's a twist. The beings feel like in order to be made whole, they're at least going to get the souls of the board. And Tony, stepping into this, has a hero moment where he makes an even broader deal with the board, whereby he will give the nether beings as recompense the Mysterium from the Ironmonger suit in exchange for the beings, like, not taking the souls of the people there. And accordingly, the board has to, as their part of the deal, annul the merger and sign over all of their Stark holdings to Tony personally. So we end issue 3 with Tony Stark consolidating his control over Stark Unlimited to a point where like the SEC might have a problem with like how consolidated like that control now is.
I should have realized when you brought Justine Hammer back, which I didn't know she was dead, but like she says you say so. I'll tell her back that I'm like, because I read too many X-Men comics. I'm like, oh yeah, she's back. That happens. I should have thought, well, it has something to do with the deal with the devil, because that's like a very normal way for a villain to come back. And I totally didn't see it coming. And then I was like, oh, that's so brilliant how the pieces fit together. Have Belasco. Amazing.
The reason that this could happen at all was because Al Ewing, who's writing Immortal Thor, is using Roxxon. And there was an early version of this story where instead of Justine, it's Dario Agger, the Minotaur.
Oh, yeah.
And that couldn't work because of what Al was doing. And Al, I was like prepared to be like, okay, well, I guess I have to think of something else. And Al very, very graciously devoted time that he did not have to devote and came up with a way that I could use Roxxon and just like, provided I didn't hit this, and this, like it wouldn't have an impact on his story. And, I was like, however you want me to be additive for you, we could. Mm-hmm. Like there's a reference to, there's references throughout to like stuff that, that Al is doing with Roxxon, but like it so happens that among the things he's doing is like introducing like mystical, frightening energies that are surrounding Roxxon. And I don't want to say the name of a character because I don't know if that character like is out in the book quite yet because of like, anyway, point being, so much credit to Al Ewing and deep gratitude for allowing me to play with Roxxon while he was.
It's great. I mean, that's what I would want from like, use like the wonderfully designed evil corporation that Marvel has, which also means that like you're entering into an existing evil corporation in the Marvel universe.
It also gives you the space because like, look, Iron Man is a superhero. Like we will be asking lots of questions, about like what that means, but like he's a hero, like coded character. And like, it helps to have a more evil corporation when your superhero is the CEO of a massive corporation and a billionaire.
That's very true too. But like Belasco, I mean, that's because you're an X-Men fan.
Yes.
I mean,
and that is also another credit to Sarah Brunstad. Some of this stuff, the way I found that this worked was like, I need a demon from the Marvel universe and I don't know who I can use. So I just like, I have something in like the relevant document that's just like demon character. And then the editors go off to a process that I don't have any visibility into. And I learn like, I can use this, not this, not this, not this. And she was like, we can use Belasco. I was like, fantastic. So
Done.
Now I can write. Yeah, exactly. Like now I can write Belasco. And
that's so great.
I got to, I didn't want to do like shameless Claremont pastiche, but I didn't not want to do that. You know what I'm saying?
No, it was like, perfect. Like I know you love X-Men and I did not see it coming until it happened. And then I was like, of course, this is what happened. This is perfect, which I think is exactly the right way for it to unfold. Like not telegraphed, but as soon as it hits, you're like, this completely makes sense. It was also very gratifying to have him call Belasco a groomer to his face. And have Belasco.
I let the record show that I have on panel that Belasco was a groomer.
Yep. Yep.
Fun to write. Like, yeah.
Jethro Morales, the guest artist, like the reaction looked on the board members' faces and in that scene with the devil and the euphemisms that people are working. Just truly glorious.
It really is.
Very relatable. Also is how Tony can't get his AI to work.
Yeah, this is just something I wanted to have fun with, and this will be a running gag. We have been lied to about, like science fiction has been lying to us about AI for quite a while, as we are now seeing with things like ChatGPT. So I wanted to have, as part of this thrown together rage armor, an AI that sucks. And that is Iron.GPT. I know that it's better for the reference if it's Stark GPT, but the problem with calling it that is then it sounds like it's commercially available technology. So, like, this is just something that's in the Iron Man helmet. And so now I just get to have fun with, like, how much AI slop is out there.
It's just so great that, like, if Tony Stark can't get it to work, then guys, don't try to replace your programmers with it. It's not going to work. Now, is this the first union organizing drive we've had in Iron Man?
I believe so. Often when we get visibility throughout Iron Man's character history into the operations of Stark Unlimited, usually we get that from A, boardroom scenes where Tony is along with like a coterie, B, other scientists that have been like employing engineers that have been like part of Stark Industries, or C, when we see like more working class employees, we see them as like Happy Hogan or James Rhodes. Like, we don't very often get characters who are like on the assembly lines at like Stark plants. And we will.
I'm so excited about that. That's really fucking cool.
Yeah, I thought that was an important thing to point out.
And we haven't seen union organizing that much in comics in general, but I was pretty sure this was the first we'd seen it in an Iron Man. And I like that you're not just talking about traditional union as we have in America. You're looking at a European-style workers' council format.
Correct.
Where he's looking for workers to have a direct say in the company's management and not just bargain against.
I mean,
which is a model from German unions.
What would it be like, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier with like, if there was a real life Stark Unlimited, it would be one of the most globally significant economic actors on Earth. What its labor relations are is a question with enormous ramification, and what they could be and what could be a model for others might be interesting questions that can dance a little bit in the raindrops of like the Iron Man mythology as established. And I may or may not be working on that.
I just love the idea of just even putting these ideas out there in a place that people can see them, to know that this is even a thing.
I think it's pretty cool myself. Only when, and I'm not saying this is like an edict. I'm saying this is how I go about like approaching the work. Only when I have delivered the superhero spectacle do I feel like I get to go into like labor relations at Stark Unlimited.
I get that, but this is my podcast, so I'm the one who's like, yeah, I'm going to talk about labor relations.
Yes.
No offense to the awesome Iron Maiden sword wielding moment,
Yes, we've gotten this far without talking about the sword yet.
Is this his first sword?
Yes. He's
thinking about Thor. That's so cool. He's like, let my buddy Thor.
The diehards will point out that there have been other moments where Iron Man has wielded a sword, but there has
travel
not
in time or whatever.
There has not been like as a central aspect of the Iron Man design, of the armor design, like a gigantic like anime sword that defies the rules of physics. And like going back to like the first conversation that Julius and I had when I asked him what he likes to draw and what he doesn't like to draw. He was like, I love giant anime swords. Is there any way we could do that? And like, there was a moment where I was just like, I don't know how, but the answer like has to be yes. If this is what you want to draw, and this is, I've tried to like, you know, Julius feels about this book the way I feel about this book. Like, we can't believe we've gotten this opportunity. So I want to let Julius demonstrate his style. Like, I want him to bring the enthusiasm that he has for it, like, tangibly onto the page. So when I had this story that became these first 3 Iron Man issues, there was no sword in there. Like, that's not how my brain works. But it's how Julius's brain works. So that's what we did. And like, I found a way to like just give the guy a sword, like have it make sense, and like have it like fit within the mythos, have it make sense within the story, and have it be the equivalent of a familiar.
I like that description. You have you bring a little warriors bit, which I was very proud to see as a fellow Brooklyn resident.
The idea that like there's this random guy in the force armor, and like they tell him right before like Iron Man like clears the mountain pass or whatever, that like he's about to fight Iron Man, and like he goes up there and this is the Iron Man that he gets, and he's disappointed.
Yeah, I that fucking troll. I mean, actually, that's the thing to talk about. You have some interesting manifestations of trolls and trolling behavior as a theme through a number of these issues, whether it's that super villain for hire, so to speak, or those jobbers who are making social media content of baiting Iron Man.
Yeah.
It feels like a really modern, good way to go.
One of the ways that we can like keep on drawing at the scale at which Tony Stark and Iron Man operate at is that it would never have occurred to him that the margins on supervillain crime are not good. And very often these guys are going to be strapped for cash and would seek to take advantage of the influencer economy. I liked having like that little beat in there after like Flying Tiger like gets his ass handed to him.
Yeah, I mean, well, it fits into the theme of Tony also talking about like the betting.
Yes.
Which is huge because like that's apparently where the young people are like wasting all their money now, is through the addictive practice of online gambling.
That's correct. We're also living in a moment. This is for, you know, any graphic policy radio listener who's also a sports person, has not been able to avoid the way that over the past year and a half, 2 years, gambling has overtaken all forms of sports media, and nearly all forms of sports media, certainly scaled forms of sports media, now have a gambling component baked into it. Like ESPN has a gambling operation. And that sure seemed like if we're going to have Stark Unlimited in the first issue, like one of the things that we know Tony Stark like has grown beyond is he recognizes that he wishes not he has a moral objection to being an arms manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
And if he is coming into the first issue like resolute about taking this publicly traded company out of arms manufacturing, he needs a plan to generate tons of revenue rapidly. And he comes up with like a deeply exploitative operation whereby he can gamify superhero fights and like come up with like an odds market for when, like, you know, for instance, Iron Man fights Flying Tiger. And like, the more like I poked at that idea, the more like I want to make that, depending on space. But like, we'll be going back to Stark booking. Like, we keep talking about Stark booking for a reason.
I'm into it. Yeah. It's like, it's just, I'm actually wondering, Frank doesn't really watch sports anymore. And now I'm actually wondering to what extent it is connected to that factor of just being like revolted by it.
I mean, I can just tell you, it won't be long before, like, I mean, already ESPN, the point I'm trying to get at, that I'm stumbling over in my mouth, is that like journalism tied to a gambling operation is a 5-alarm fire in my mind. Mm-hmm. Like all of the incentives for news manipulation are present. And it's the same thing with like a really big thing, something I personally enjoy a lot, is NBA players, like active players, have podcasts now. And like you get like a level, I mean, it's highly curated and partial access, but like it is the thing that in prior modes of media technology and distribution, like only established news organizations could provide readers with, or could provide listeners or, viewers with. And that no longer is the case. And those are also tied up. They like the gambling operations sponsor the podcast. So like it's revenue generation for the player. And like, how long, like there's already been one basketball player, a guy whose name I'm blanking on, who's a Toronto Raptor, who got hit with a federal indictment for manipulating the gambling market by his play. And, similarly, there was an enormous scandal in baseball where like Shohei Ohtani's, like one of his chief aides, and I believe his translator, was like deeply, deeply in gambling debt. That some implications were like he must have had inside knowledge and was trying to, capitalize on. And just thinking about the ways in which like all of the incentives, this has nothing to do with comic books, like all of the incentives around the players, around everyone in this sport, around people around sports, is now to like manipulate the product to make money, make money off trading off insider access. And now imagine if like one of the world's leading superheroes opens a gambling market in superhero fights. Like, you will be exploiting your fans. Like in like direct way. Anyway, like right now,
this is fascinating. And it's like, and I think this is exactly on the point, This
is just taking hold right now. And I should also say, yet again, big superhero action, thrills, fast moving is the assignment.
I hear you, but the people who only want that aren't listening to my podcast. So you don't have to worry about making it clear that you are making something that is very entertaining.
Well, also, I don't want to like misdirect people about like how much of that stuff there is, I
mean, they also know that it's not mouse, all right. Come on,
Jesus.
We sit somewhere in the middle. It's all good. But it really feels very timely for all those reasons to like address that directly in the comic. And then I loved when they were discussing Roxxon's public image and somebody says, like, publish comics now. How could a public comics publisher be evil? And I was like, I'm sure that predates this comic.
Yeah, so that's a thing that that Al is doing in Immortal 4. That
got it, because
as a propaganda thing, Roxxon basically operates Marvel Comics.
Oh wow! Because I mean, but like this is a comic that is in dialogue with topical shit that we are thinking about and dealing with in the real world. I want to go to a couple of listener questions. Somebody asked, whose idea was it for the awesome Insurgent Iron Man title?
That was mine. I wanted the whole book to be called Insurgent Iron Man. It will make a lot of sense that the adjective comes for the One World Under Doom event. And I'll leave it there.
Noted.
And so accordingly, before that happens, it makes sense that it doesn't, that it's, I mean, also the way it seems, I learned this myself. The way it seems they like to solicit the books when they do runs is adjective on, adjective off. So Dan Slott's was Tony Stark Iron Man. Chris Cantwell's was Iron Man. Jerry Duggan's was Invincible Iron Man. Mine, which I was like, let's call it Insurgent Iron Man. They're like, it's called Iron Man. However, when One World Under Doom happens, then it is Insurgent Iron Man.
Cool. So excited about One World Under Doom as a result of this important news.
You should be. I have read the whole thing. Ryan North is doing the damn thing. It is incredible.
Wow.
Ryan North's Fantastic Four is amazing. Everyone who's not up on this right now, do yourself a favor. He's writing an incredible Fantastic Four book. The heart that anyway, I can't say enough good things about this. So Fantastic Four, incredible book. One World Under Doom, going to be a tremendous, tremendous crossover.
Callian asks, who is the best Iron Man supporting character and why is it Mrs. Arbogast?
Oh, Mrs. A. I kind of agree. Mrs. Arbogast is basically his, to be really reductive about it to the point where this person who I'm about to agree with might be angry with me. His work mom. She's his assistant, his gal Friday, his Emma Candy. In some versions of her, kind of like the Black Widow character in Iron Man 2, where secretly she's also outside world, machination liaison, but deeply cares for Tony. The reason why she's the best supporting character, she's the best of the supporting cast that keeps coming back, is there's no one where he can properly express and receive love and gratitude from parental figures. The relationship with his father is a fraught one. They don't really delve so much into his mother's. Kieran Gillen's run changes a lot about Tony Stark's parentage. And so the material description of this relationship does not match the emotional description of this relationship, because the emotional description of this relationship is that she's the mother he found. But also you just have to remember at the same time, this is this man's employee. So we need to pump the brakes on that a little bit, but she's an amazing character.
That sounds really cool. And anybody else you want to add? Because that does sound really cool. Or that might just be the answer.
Let's keep it at that, because the question was who's the best?
And it is Mrs. Arbogast. We also have top 5 Iron Man villains throughout his history.
I want to make clear that by answering this, I'm not promising anyone.
I get it.
Ultimo, the robot that isn't Ultron. I'm assuming the parameters for this question is from the Iron Man comic and not from the Avengers comic.
Yeah.
Right. So often in the 90s, and especially in the Busiek Chen run, and Zurchin, no disrespect to Petr Zurchin, this guy is fighting this giant Amazo-style huge mech. It's just an enormous big boy. And Iron Man, anyway, when it's an Ultimo comic, it's going to be a good time. Fin Fang Foom is always Fin Fan fun.
Oh, I like it.
So I like this guy, Force, who comes in, like I put him in issue 2. I like Force because he's an armored character who is bad guy coded and then goes on a redemption arc. The specific character who's in the armor, who has multiple names and it's confusing. Eventually, by the time he gets to like the Kaminsky run, and I believe also the Buzik Chen run, is like actively like doing like helpful heroing on part with Iron Man. So like I don't want to like interrupt his arc. So I just like put a different guy in. But like I like that character because it's basically when like done right is like a Deathstroke Iron Man character, an unscrupulous armor character, but also like not the most imaginative, like armor guy, like still kind of a knockaround guy. I think you can get some good stories out of the controller. I don't know why this man refuses to moisturize, but that's his business. And then that leaves us, in the number 1 spot. I will die on this hill. But it's Dr. Doom. Like this is not a cheat. Like Iron Man fights Doom in like the Iron Man comics all the time. Doom is Iron Man in Superior Iron Man. That's Victor Von Doom in the armor. So he counts as like Iron Man's rogues gallery. And I absolutely love Dr. Doom. I love Dr. Doom. I love Iron Man versus Dr. Doom. I'm really excited and I wonder what will happen for One World Under Doom.
I'm just really excited by this book right now. Like the fact that this comic knows that Krakoa happened and cares about it, even just as meaningful to me.
Well, thank you. To me as well. In my mind, this book just like takes the baton right from Jerry. And there will be some elements that you'll see because like he's also writing a very good Iron Man and West Coast Avengers right now. And there are like ways in which that like we deconflict, like that's fun. But yeah, Krakoa happened. The mandate for the book is for it not to be an X-Men book, so I don't want to exaggerate this, but like
sure.
In my mind, like Tony is working out a lot of what he just experienced, right as like his life is, keeping the challenges that he confronts like on a scale with those sorts of consequences.
I love it. And it's a richer story and world for having done so. I mean,
credit to the writers of Krakow.
Well, listen, like you're only on issue 3. We've already talked about corporate espionage and corporate warfare, the oil and energy industries, machinations and evil, including the oil company run by a Minotaur. Which the second I said that to Frank, he just fucking broke out laughing.
It's incredible. Love that.
It's just right.
I've been in a car with no skin on its face.
Yeah, of course. And it's called Roxxon. I mean, Peter David, ladies and gentlemen. So you have the evil Minotaur energy company. You've got internet trolls harassing people, politics around gaming markets, being, survivor guilt from a genocide, labor organizing. Like there's so much, and then just every exchange that Tony has with civilians around Washington Square. There is like in New York City, right? And there's so much in this book. It is so packed.
Right as Jerry Duggan like makes a point in Invincible Iron Man 20. They're like, we're going back to California. I'm like, not. Like, not when a New Yorker has control of Iron Man. Yeah. But in issue 4, we will indeed be back on California. This is not a New York comic book.
Oh. I just love that woman, like this fucking ironmonger picks up this woman's car and like she's just as like terrified, and like his interaction with her I thought felt like really New Yorker moment. Was good. Sorry. Good.
Yeah, just like you, because I gotta keep doing this. Get away. Yeah. You people get back here. Like, you want to move away from this, not toward it, even though that apparently is the choice you're going to make.
Oh, I meant also with the woman in the car.
Yes,
also.
yes.
She's
I'm
wonderful.
praying for you.
Anyway. Yeah, I'm praying for you, Tony. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Anyway, so thank you for all that. Those are all such big, fun swings, and I love that we have them straight out of the ballpark. So how can our listeners best support your work?
Please go to your local comic store and ask them to put Iron Man in your pull list. That is the thing that Marvel cares about the most. Barring that, purchasing it through the apps. And then please just tell a friend to tell a friend, say things about this book to people. Even if you don't like it, obviously I'd prefer if you like it, but talk about it. Even if, I mean, for listeners of this podcast, this probably, if I dare say, isn't so much of an issue, but like, I firmly believe that like, you can hate my writing and my politics and enjoy Iron Man because of the level of craftsmanship you will get from Julius Autois and Alex Sinclair. This book is gorgeous. I can't believe how lucky I am with this. This is not something I take for granted. Also, a thing not to take for granted, to step back for a moment. The fact that an artist on the rise like Julius is working with a legend of comics coloring like Alex. It is not always the case, as longtime comic readers can appreciate, that an artist and a colorist's styles complement one another.
This is true.
And you're getting that with Iron Man. So please buy it, and buy it consistently, and tell friends to buy it.
Well, as for me, I'm spending a little bit too much time on Blue Sky, where my handle is at LEVIN. That's Levin, like my last name. We have more amazing comics coverage and insights coming your way.
You can also follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram at Attackerman, ATTACKERMAN. And my newsletter, Forever Wars, will have much Iron Man content in between my journalism about the war on terror and quote unquote national security. You can find that at forever-wars.com and sign up there.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Spencer, for joining us again. You know, I just want to make a quick suggestion to our listeners. My dear friend, Rena Gross, has a new podcast that she's launched called Biopic, a podcast story, which, as you can probably tell, is a podcast about biopics. Oh, here's their blurb. In a world where mimicking the gestures of historical figures is awards bait, Biopic, a podcast story, examines the good, the bad, the unspeakable, and the hilarious about this category of film that frequently dominates the Oscars, but just as often offends our sensibilities. A Biopic, a podcast story, looks at the casting, the acting, the quality of the script, and the endless tropes that dominate these movies. And the podcast sits at the meeting point between movie, comedy, and history podcasts. Episodes are every Tuesday. They just put out one on Trumbo, the Dalton Trumbo biopic, and before that they did Marie Antoinette, with a special guest who's a fashion history expert. I will be on that podcast in March to talk about Listomania, the Ken Russell film starring Roger Daltrey of The Who. Folks should go check out her podcast. I think folks will enjoy it a lot. Anyway, I want to thank you all for your patience and for continuing to support our show. And as we like to say, keep it geeky.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.